His belongings fit neatly into 3 suitcases, designer luggage I'd gifted him last Christmas. The irony wasn't lost on me as I watched David pack, methodically folding his expensive shirts with the practiced precision of someone who'd been planning this moment for months. I think we both knew this was coming, Eliza. His voice was calm, reasonable, as if he were explaining a simple business transaction instead of ending 8 years of marriage. We want different things. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I sat silently on the edge of our bed, our California king, with the memory foam mattress that had cost nearly $5,000, another expense I'd shouldered without complaint. Through the bedroom window, autumn leaves spiraled down from the maple tree in our yard, the same tree we'd planted together when we first moved in. 3 years of growth, now just part of the property he was leaving behind. Different things, I repeated, keeping my voice steady. Like what exactly? David sighed, that familiar sound of exasperation that had become his standard response to any meaningful conversation. He paused his packing, ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, the monthly maintenance for which cost more than most, people's utility bills, adventure, passion, a chance to really live. He gestured vaguely around our bedroom, at the tasteful decor I'd selected to create the perfect showcase home he'd wanted. Not just this. Our life together. The stability I'd built for us. The debt I'd cleared for him. The foundation I'd created while he chased one entrepreneurial opportunity after another. I almost laughed. 6 weeks ago, exactly 42 days to be precise, I'd made the final payment on his $103,457.83 student loan debt. The loans that had financed his MBA from Wharton, the prestigious degree that had opened doors for him while simultaneously shackling him to crushing monthly payments. Payments I had taken over when his 3rd startup failed. But David didn't know. I'd paid them off. He believed we were still making the minimum payments, carefully budgeting each month to accommodate the $200 that disappeared from our account like clockwork. He never checked the loan statements. Financial details bored him unless they involved potential windfalls or impressive figures he could drop at dinner parties. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I see, I said, watching him zip the first suitcase closed with a decisive movement. And Megan? Is she part of this adventure? His hand stilled momentarily. The only confirmation I needed, Megan Winters, his new company's marketing director. 15 years younger than his 38. I'd seen the texts 2 months ago, had watched their relationship develop in real time through digital breadcrumbs neither had bothered to hide, particularly well. This isn't about Megan, he lied smoothly, resuming his packing. This is about me needing to grow. We've become different people, Eliza. You're so practical, so focused on security. The irony of his statement hit me like a physical blow. Security, the very thing he'd desperately needed when his credit score had plummeted to 520, when collections agencies called our home at all hours, when he'd sat across from me at our kitchen table, the reclaimed wood farmhouse piece I'd refinished myself, and asked for my help. I need this chance, Eliza. Evotech is going to be huge. The investors are already lining up. His voice took on the familiar evangelical tone he used when pitching a new business idea. This could be my big break. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Evotech. His latest venture, a supposedly revolutionary fitness app that would disrupt the entire health industry. Just like his meal delivery service was going to transform how America eats before it collapsed under poor management. Just like his boutique staffing agency was going to revolutionize the gig economy before it hemorrhaged cash for 14 straight months. The difference was that this time, David had convinced actual investors to back him. This time, He had a real office instead of our spare bedroom. This time, he had Megan. "I hope it works out for you," I said finally, watching as he filled his second suitcase with the designer shoes I'd surprised him with after his last birthday. The $890 leather loafers still had the receipt tucked inside the box. I'd planned to return them if they didn't fit perfectly. Another financial consideration David never bothered with. "You'll be fine," he said, and I detected the first hint of guilt in his voice. "You've always been good with money. Practical." He said the word like it was some kind of character flaw, like my ability to delay gratification was a personality defect rather than the trait that had saved us from financial ruin multiple times. I remained quiet, watching him pack the third suitcase with his collection of watches, including the vintage Omega I'd hunted down because it matched one his father had owned. The accessories that helped him look the part of successful entrepreneur while I handled the mundane reality of keeping our household solvent. "We can talk about the house later," he continued, glancing around our bedroom. "I know you love it here, but selling might be best. Split the equity and make a clean break." I bit back a bitter laugh. The house was solely in my name, another financial decision I'd made when his credit was too poor to qualify for our mortgage. The equity was mine alone, though I'd never corrected his assumption that we were co-owners. Just as I'd never corrected his assumption that our investment portfolio was jointly held. Just as I'd never explained that his luxury car was leased through my personal LLC, not financed in our names as he believed. "We can discuss all that later," I agreed, keeping my voice neutral. "You should focus on your new beginning." David flashed me a relieved smile, that charismatic, perfect-toothed smile that had first caught my attention at a crowded networking event 9 years ago. Back then, I'd been a junior financial analyst at Meridian Capital, carefully building my reputation and my savings account. He'd been a recent MBA graduate with big dreams, student loan debt, and an infectious enthusiasm for the future. "You've always been so understanding," he said, zipping the final suitcase. "That's what I've always admired about you. Understanding." The word burned in my chest. Understanding was what had led me to consolidate his scattered, high-interest loans. Understanding was what had motivated me to secretly divert my year-end bonuses to pay down his principal. Understanding was the reason I'd continued supporting his entrepreneurial whims while quietly building my own safety net. David checked his watch, the Omega, and pulled out his phone. "The Uber will be here in 5 minutes." Of course, he wouldn't even be taking his leased BMW. Another loose end for me to handle. "Where will you stay?" I asked, though I already knew. Megan had a luxury apartment in the trendy Harbor District, paid for by her divorce settlement from a tech executive 3 times her age. "I've got a place lined up," he said vaguely. "I'll text you the address for anything important that needs forwarding." I nodded, standing up from the bed as he gathered his luggage. 3 suitcases containing 8 years of marriage. 8 years during which I'd risen from junior analyst to senior portfolio manager at Meridian. 8 years during which I'd secretly founded Artemis Financial Consulting, my boutique firm specializing in debt management for high-net-worth individuals. 8 years during which I'd accumulated a client list that included 3 Fortune 500 CEOs and a handful of professional athletes. 8 years during which David had remained blissfully unaware that his practically minded wife had built a 7-figure business right under his nose. He'd never asked about the late nights at the office, never questioned the business calls I took in another room, never wondered about the specialized financial software on my personal laptop. His own financial troubles had consumed so much of his attention that he'd never noticed my success. Convenient blind spot that had served me well as I built my company. David wheeled his suitcases to the door, then turned back to me with an awkward hesitation. "I've transferred my portion of this month's expenses to the joint account, for the mortgage and stuff." His portion was a token amount that wouldn't cover even the property taxes. I simply nodded again, following him down the stairs to our 2-story foyer with its gleaming hardwood floors and statement chandelier. "This is better in the long run," he said, pausing at the front door. "You deserve someone who wants the same kind of life you do." "I hope you find what you're looking for, David," I replied, meaning it despite everything. There was no hatred in me, just a cold, clear-eyed assessment of the situation. In truth, his departure simplified matters considerably. His phone buzzed, with the Uber notification. With one last uncertain smile, he was gone, rolling his suitcases down our brick pathway to the waiting car. I watched from the doorway as he loaded his luggage, as he climbed into the back seat without a backward glance. As the car disappeared around the corner of our quiet, upscale neighborhood, I closed the door and leaned against it, finally alone with the silence of my house. Only then did I allow myself a small, tight smile. David's exit had been timed poorly, at least from his perspective. In exactly 2 weeks, Artemis Financial would be featured in Forbes as one of the fastest-growing boutique financial firms in the country. The journalist had already interviewed me, had already photographed me in my sleek downtown office with its panoramic views of the city skyline. The announcement of our expansion into 3 major cities was already scheduled for the press release. Phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Caroline, my executive assistant. Contracts just arrived from Westlake. They went with the full package. 3-year commitment. Another major client secured. The 3rd this month. I moved to my home office, the modest room at the back of the house that David had always dismissed as Eliza's little workspace. Unlocking my computer, I pulled up my secure email and began composing a message to my lawyer, outlining the necessary steps now that David had left. There would be divorce papers to prepare, accounts to separate, assets to document, and 1 student loan account to transfer back into his name. The sweet satisfaction of that thought almost made me laugh out loud. For 42 days, the automated payment system had been transferring $1,200 monthly from our joint account into my personal savings, money David thought was still going toward his loans. He hadn't noticed, just as he hadn't noticed so many things over the years. When he discovered that his loans were paid in full, he would naturally assume I'd done it as a final act of generosity. He would never suspect that I'd been accelerating the payments for years, strategically eliminating his debt while maintaining the illusion of ongoing financial constraint. He would never know that his freedom from student loan debt, the very thing that might actually allow his latest venture to succeed without the pressure of personal financial obligations, was my parting gift. A gift he would only discover after he'd walked away. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out a bottle of Macallan 25, a special reserve I'd been saving for a significant occasion. This certainly qualified. Pouring 2 fingers into a crystal tumbler, I swirled the amber liquid, admiring its rich color in the afternoon light filtering through my office windows. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Marcus, my business partner at Artemis. Westlake signed. Also, that hedge fund manager from Chicago called again. Wants to meet next week. This is getting big, Eliza. I smiled, typing a quick response before setting my phone. Aside. Marcus had been with me since the beginning, one of the few people who knew the full extent of both my professional success and my marital situation. He'd questioned my decision to keep Artemis secret from David, but had respected my choice. "Your husband doesn't know what a powerhouse he's married to," Marcus had commented once, after we'd secured our first 7-figure client. He'd been right, of course. David had never known, had never bothered to discover, who I really was beyond. The supportive wife who managed our finances and tolerated his failures. He'd been too absorbed in his own narrative of eventual success to notice mine unfolding in real time. The irony wasn't lost on me as I sipped my whiskey and gazed out the window at the manicured backyard David had also left behind. While he'd been chasing his elusive big break, I'd quietly built something substantial. While he'd accumulated debt, I'd accumulated assets. While he'd required financial rescue, I'd been lifeguard and lifeboat for others through Artemis. I opened my laptop and pulled up the calendar for the coming month. It was packed with client meetings, strategic planning sessions for the expansion, and the final preparations for the Forbes feature. The next few weeks would be busy, productively, profitably busy. After 8 years of compartmentalizing my life, of maintaining the fiction of being merely David's practical wife, I could finally consolidate my identities. Eliza Chen, private financial savior to the indebted elite. Eliza Chen, founder and CEO of Artemis Financial Consulting. Eliza Chen, soon-to-be divorced woman whose husband had no idea what he'd walked away from. I raised my glass in a silent toast to the empty house. To new beginnings, I murmured, just as my phone lit up with an incoming call. It was Jason Hargrove, my lawyer. I heard the news, he said when I answered. David finally made his move? Just left, I confirmed, taking another sip of Macallan. 3 suitcases and a waiting Uber. Very dramatic exit. And the timing? Perfect, I replied. The Forbes piece runs in 2 weeks, the Chicago expansion announcement the week after. He couldn't have planned it better if we'd coordinated calendars. Jason's low chuckle came through the line. Has he figured out about the loans yet? No, and he won't until the first missed payment notification doesn't arrive. I swirled my whiskey, watching it catch the light. Probably another 2 weeks, give or take. What about the house? The car? He thinks we're co-owners of both. I'll let him maintain that illusion until the divorce papers are drawn up. More leverage for us. Brilliant as always, Eliza. Jason's admiration was evident. I'll have the preliminary paperwork ready by Friday. Anything else we should address immediately? I thought for a moment, considering the joint account with its modest balance, the investment portfolio David believed we shared, the credit cards he still had access to. Freeze the joint credit cards, I decided, but leave the checking account active for now. Let's see what he does with it. Consider it done. And Eliza? Jason's voice softened slightly. For what it's worth, I'm sorry about the marriage. Even if this works out better for you professionally. I appreciated Jason's sentiment, but the truth was more complicated than simple sorrow. There was disappointment, certainly. Disappointment that the man I'd chosen had turned out to be so fundamentally self-involved. There was a measure of regret for the years invested. But overwhelming those emotions was a sense of liberation, of barriers falling away. Thank you, Jason, I said. But I think we both know this ending was inevitable. David needed someone to adore him unconditionally, to believe in his greatness without evidence. That was never going to be me. After ending the call, I moved through the house with my whiskey, taking inventory of what remained and what had changed with David's departure. His absence was already tangible. The master bathroom counter missing his array of grooming products, the closet half empty, the subtle scent of his cologne fading from the air. In the kitchen, I opened the refrigerator and surveyed its contents. The specialty foods David preferred occupied prime shelf space: organic protein shakes, imported cheeses, cold-pressed juices. I closed the door, making a mental note to donate what I wouldn't use. My phone buzzed with a calendar notification. Tomorrow morning, breakfast meeting with Vanessa Torres, potential client, tech industry heiress with complicated estate and debt issues, the kind of high-maintenance, high-reward client Artemis specialized in. The kind of meeting I would no longer need to fabricate excuses to attend. I moved to the living room and settled onto the Italian leather sofa, another expensive purchase I'd financed while David selected the design. Through the large front windows, I could see the neighborhood settling into evening. Lights coming on in neighboring homes. People returning from work to their families. For the first time in years, my double life was collapsing into a single reality. The relief was palpable. My phone rang again, Marcus this time. I just heard from Caroline, he said without preamble. Is it true? David actually left? 3 suitcases and the clothes on his back, I confirmed, stretching my legs, out on the sofa and getting comfortable. Currently en route to Megan's apartment, I assume. Jesus. Marcus let out a low whistle. Right before the Forbes piece, right before Chicago. The man has spectacular timing. Doesn't he just? I agreed, unable to keep the ironic amusement from my voice. Want company? I could bring takeout from that Thai place you like. We could strategize about the announcement while drowning your sorrows. I considered his offer. Marcus was my closest friend as well as my business partner. He knew everything. The struggles with David's debt, the careful financial management, the strategic decision to keep Artemis separate from my marriage. Not tonight, I decided. Tonight I need to sit with this, make some plans. But tomorrow, after the Torres meeting? Absolutely. You got it. And Eliza? Marcus's voice was warm with concern. For what it's worth, David's an idiot. Not just for leaving, but for never seeing who he was really married to. After we hung up, I finished my whiskey and headed upstairs to the master bedroom. David's hasty packing had left subtle traces, a forgotten cufflink on the dresser, an empty hanger askew in the closet, the faint impression of his luggage on the carpet. I changed into comfortable clothes and moved to the walk-in closet, pushing aside my everyday work attire to reveal the collection of designer pieces I reserved for important client meetings and industry events. Clothing I'd never worn at home, never modeled for David, never incorporated into my domestic identity. Running my fingers along the luxurious fabrics, the Armani blazers, the Chanel dresses, the Louboutin heels, I contemplated which outfit would be most appropriate for tomorrow's meeting with Vanessa Torres. The young heiress would respond well to someone who projected both success and understanding, someone who could navigate her world of privilege while offering practical financial guidance. My phone chimed with a text message. David. Made it to my new place. We'll arrange to pick up the BMW this weekend if that works for you. I stared at the message, contemplating my response. The BMW that he believed was jointly leased. The car that was actually registered to my LLC. No. Rush, I typed back. It's paid up through the end of the month. Another small deception in a marriage built on compartmentalized truths. Returning to the bedroom, I picked up the framed photo on my nightstand. David and me on our honeymoon in Bali, both of us laughing as we posed on the beach. He looked carefree, charismatic, full of promise. I looked cautiously optimistic, already beginning to recognize the patterns that would define our marriage. I placed the photo face down in the drawer and closed it firmly. Tomorrow would mark the first day of my consolidated life, the first day when Eliza Chen, financial consultant and quiet success story, would no longer need to shrink herself to accommodate David's ego. The first day when my achievements wouldn't need to be hidden to preserve domestic harmony. My phone buzzed with another notification. An email from the Forbes journalist, requesting one final quote for the feature article. I moved back to my office to craft a careful response, something that captured the essence of Artemis without revealing too much about my personal journey. As I typed, I glanced at the digital clock on my desk. 7:42 p.m. Almost precisely 3 hours since David had rolled his 3 suitcases out the door. 3 hours into my new life. 3 hours of freedom from pretense. And in 2 weeks, when the Forbes article hit and David discovered that his student loans had mysteriously disappeared, the true implications of his decision to leave would begin to dawn on him. The man who had dismissed his wife as merely practical would discover just how strategic she had actually been. I completed the email to Forbes, hit send, and closed my laptop with a satisfied click. Phase 1 complete. David's exit. Precisely. As I'd anticipated when I'd noticed the first text messages from Megan 2 months ago. Phase 2 would begin tomorrow. The careful untangling of our financial connections. The strategic positioning of assets. The preparation for the revelations to come. And when David finally realized what he'd walked away from, Well, that would be the beginning of Phase 3. I smiled at the thought, already anticipating the phone call that would inevitably come once the Forbes article was published, already rehearsing my response when he finally understood the magnitude of his miscalculation. It would be the sweetest victory of all. Success served cold to the man who had never bothered to see it simmering right before his eyes. The Torres meeting went exactly as planned. Vanessa, tech heiress, reluctant board member of her late father's company, and possessor of spectacularly poor investment judgment, sat across from me in Artemis's downtown conference room. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the city skyline, deliberately positioned to impress clients with both the view and our prime real estate. My financial advisor says I should diversify, Vanessa explained, stirring her untouched latte. She wore designer jeans and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. But honestly, I don't even understand what I currently own. Marcus caught my eye from across the table, his expression carefully neutral. We'd seen this scenario countless times. Wealthy clients who'd inherited money without inheriting financial literacy. That's why we start with a complete audit, I explained, sliding a leather portfolio across the polished conference table. Before making recommendations, we need to understand your current situation, assets, liabilities, cash flow patterns. Vanessa brightened, relieved someone else would take responsibility. That sounds perfect. My father's estate is complicated. Complicated is our specialty, Marcus added smoothly. My phone buzzed discreetly in my blazer pocket, a text from Caroline. David called the office looking for you. Didn't know what to say about Ms. Chen's availability? Stalled him. A small ripple disturbed my professional calm. David, calling my office? He'd never shown interest in my work at Meridian Capital, the investment firm where he believed I still worked as a senior portfolio manager. He'd certainly never called me there. We'll assign a dedicated financial analyst to your case, I continued, focusing on Vanessa while typing a quick response to Caroline. Perfect. If he calls again, you're my assistant at Meridian. Transfer to voicemail. The meeting concluded, with Vanessa signing our service agreement, a 6-figure annual contract with performance bonuses. As Marcus escorted her out, I checked my personal phone. 3 missed calls from David, no messages. Another major client secured, Marcus announced, returning to the conference room. And she's already referred us to 2 friends. The Torres. Connections will be valuable for the Chicago expansion, I agreed, my mind still partially occupied by David's unexpected calls. Marcus tilted his head, studying me. You seem distracted. David problems already? He called the office. I frowned, scrolling through my phone. 3 attempts, no voicemail. Interesting timing. Second thoughts about leaving, perhaps? Marcus suggested, gathering his materials from the table. More likely practical concerns. The BMW, perhaps, or questions about the joint account. I dismissed the momentary unease. Nothing urgent. We moved to my private office, a corner suite designed to project subtle power. Unlike the flashy glass and chrome aesthetic favored by many financial firms, Artemis embraced understated luxury, walnut paneling, museum-quality art, and furniture that prioritized comfort alongside style. The design reflected our brand philosophy, wealth managed with taste and discretion. The Forbes photographer wants one final session before publication, Marcus said, consulting his tablet as he settled into one of the leather chairs opposite my desk. They're suggesting the waterfront for some exterior shots. I nodded, mentally reviewing my schedule. Thursday morning works. That gives us time before the Chicago trip. Are you sure you want to go public now? Marcus asked, voicing the question he'd raised several times since the Forbes opportunity arose. With David just having left, the timing is complicated. The timing is perfect, I corrected him, leaning back in my chair. Artemis has operated in the shadows long enough. The Forbes feature coincides exactly with our expansion plans. David's departure simply removes the final complication. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Caroline. He's here. In reception. Asking to see you. My heartbeat accelerated slightly, a physiological betrayal of my outward composure. David. Here. In the sleek, modern reception area of Artemis Financial Consulting, the company he didn't know existed. Problem? Marcus asked, noting my expression. David's downstairs. I stood, smoothing my skirt, a habit when preparing for confrontation. Apparently, he couldn't wait for a return call. Marcus raised his eyebrows. Want me to handle it? Send him away? I considered the offer for a moment, then shook my head. No, this was inevitable. Better now, on my terms, than later. I typed a response to Caroline. Send him up in 5 minutes. Standard client protocol. Marcus understood immediately what that meant. The formal visitor badge, the escort to the executive floor, the professional courtesy extended to valued clients. David would be treated as any other important visitor, not as the husband of the CEO. Want me to stay? Marcus offered, already knowing my answer. No need, but perhaps linger near Caroline's desk, just in case this becomes unprofessional. After Marcus left, I took a moment to center myself, gazing out at the city below. Then I made one strategic adjustment to my office, opening the credenza to reveal the bar setup, removing the bottle of Macallan 25, and placing it prominently on the corner of my desk with 2 crystal tumblers, the same whiskey I'd sipped alone the night before after David's departure. A small touch, but one he would notice. One that would connect this unfamiliar office to our shared history. Caroline's voice came through the intercom. Ms. Chen, your visitor has arrived. Send him in, I responded, remaining seated behind my desk. The door opened, and David stepped into my office, his confident stride faltering slightly as he took in the surroundings. He wore one of his designer suits, Brunello Cucinelli, purchased during better financial times, and carried the messenger bag I'd given him when Evotech secured its first round of funding. His eyes swept from the panoramic views to the expensive furnishings, finally settling on me, or rather, on the version of me he'd never seen before. The Eliza who wore a tailored Armani suit and Louboutin heels to work. The Eliza whose office proclaimed success and authority. Eliza? His voice contained genuine confusion. What is this place? I gestured to the chair across from my desk. Please, sit down. He remained standing, taking another bewildered look around. Caroline downstairs said this is Artemis Financial. She called you Ms. Chen, like you own the place. His laugh was uncertain. What's going on? I thought you worked at Meridian. I did until 3 years ago. I folded my hands on the desk. Artemis is my company, David. I founded it 5 years ago while still at Meridian, then transitioned to running it full-time. The information visibly stunned him. He sank into the visitor's chair, his expression cycling through confusion, disbelief, and the dawning realization that he was facing a significant unknown. Your company? He repeated. But how? When? You never said anything. You never asked. The simple truth hung between us. In 8 years of marriage, David had never shown sufficient interest in my professional life to discover that I'd founded and built a thriving financial consultancy, had never questioned the convenient explanation that my late nights were due to client work at Meridian, had never wondered about the conferences and business trips that had established Artemis's reputation in financial circles. So all this time, he began, gesturing vaguely at the office, all this time, I confirmed, I've been building something while you pursued your various ventures. His eyes landed on the Macallan 25, recognition flickering across his face. That's the same whiskey from our bar at home. Yes? I reached for the bottle. Would you like some? He nodded, still processing. I poured 2 fingers into each tumbler, sliding one across to him, He took it and immediately drank half, likely needing the liquid courage. "Why keep it secret?" he finally asked. "Why not tell me?" It was the obvious question, yet the answer was complicated, layered with the subtle power dynamics of our marriage, with my observations of how David responded to others' success, with my strategic assessment of what our relationship could and couldn't bear. At first, it was just a side project, something I was building quietly while maintaining my position at Meridian. I took a small sip of whiskey. Then, as it grew, I recognized that our relationship had a certain balance. One that might be disrupted if circumstances changed. "What's that supposed to mean?" A defensive edge entered his voice. "It means you were comfortable being married to Eliza, the supportive financial manager. The practical wife who handled the budget and kept us solvent through your startups and setbacks." I met his gaze directly. "You might have been less comfortable with Eliza, the CEO. He flinched slightly, but didn't deny it. "So you just, what, led a double life? Pretended to be someone else in our marriage?" "I compartmentalized," I corrected. "And I observed. Every time I tried to offer business advice based on my experience, you dismissed it. Remember the Thompson account suggestion you laughed about with your friends?" His face flushed. He remembered. "That strategy you mockingly attributed to your financially prudent wife was the same approach that landed Artemis 3 major clients." I gestured around the office. "This company was built on the expertise you consistently undervalued." David drained his whiskey, his expression hardening. "So this is what, some kind of gotcha moment? You waited until I left to reveal your secret success?" "No, David. The timing is simply coincidental." I kept my voice level. "The Forbes feature on Artemis comes out next week. I would have had this conversation with you then, regardless of your decision to leave." "Forbes?" His eyebrows rose. "You're in Forbes. Artemis is. Fastest growing boutique financial consultancy. The piece highlights our expansion into Chicago, Boston, and Los Angeles." I allowed myself a small smile. "Your timing for ending our marriage was impeccable, if unintentional." He stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "This is unbelievable. All these years you've been... what? Judging me? Watching me struggle while you secretly built all this?" "No." I remained seated, maintaining the power position behind my desk. "I've been supporting you financially and otherwise, while simultaneously pursuing my own goals. Goals you showed no interest in." He turned back to me, his expression shifting as a new thought occurred to him. "The student loans, my Wharton debt, that's why you came to my office, to tell me about that?" "No," I replied. "I assumed you hadn't checked the loan statements yet. Checked the..." He stopped, his eyes widening. "What are you saying?" "Your student loans are paid off, David. The final payment was made 43 days ago." He stared at me, processing this new information. "But we still make the monthly payments. I see the transfers from our account." "Those transfers now go to a separate savings account," I explained. "I accelerated the loan payments over the past 3 years, directing additional funds from my personal accounts to eliminate the principal." David braced himself against the windowsill, visibly destabilized by these revelations. $103,000? Just gone? You paid it off without telling me?" "Yes." "Why?" His voice cracked slightly. "Why do that if you knew I was..." He couldn't finish. The sentence couldn't explicitly acknowledge his affair with Megan or his plans to leave. "Because it was the right financial decision," I answered simply. "The interest was substantial. Eliminating the debt improved our overall financial position, regardless of our marital status." David returned to the desk, reaching for the Macallan and pouring himself another generous measure without asking. His hands trembled slightly. "So you're telling me that while I've been killing myself trying to make Evotech successful, trying to finally build something substantial, you've been running this? He gestured around the office. And you paid off my loans? Just like that? Success takes different forms, David. I kept my tone neutral. You pursued yours. I pursued mine. The difference is that I supported both. He drank his second whiskey, his mind visibly racing. I could almost see the calculations behind his eyes, reassessing our years together, reconsidering his assumptions, perhaps even reevaluating his decision to leave. How successful is Artemis exactly? He finally asked. I considered how much to reveal, then decided complete transparency served my purposes best. We manage over $500 million in assets. Our client list includes 3 Fortune 500 CEOs, several professional athletes, and numerous high-net-worth individuals with complex financial situations. David exhaled slowly, the magnitude sinking in. Jesus, Eliza, that's incredible. Thank you. I accepted the compliment with a small nod. It's been challenging but rewarding. A heavy silence fell between us. Through the glass walls of my office, I could see Marcus hovering near Caroline's desk, pretending to review documents while keeping a watchful eye on our interaction. Why did you come here today, David? I asked finally. He looked up from his empty tumbler, momentarily confused by the question. Oh, I needed to discuss the car, the BMW. I realized it's leased through next March, and with me leaving, the BMW is registered to my LLC, I informed him. You can continue using it until you find a suitable replacement, but it remains my asset. Another blow landed, another assumption corrected. Your LLC, he repeated. Of course. He set down his glass, with deliberate care. What else don't I know, Eliza? What other surprises are waiting? The house is solely in my name, I said, deciding to clarify everything at once. The investment portfolio you believe we share is my personal account. The credit cards you use are tied to my business. David looked stunned. Are you saying I have nothing? You have Evotech, I reminded him. Your new venture with its promising investor interest. And now you have 0 student loan debt, which significantly improves your financial position. He stood again, his movements less steady after 2 swift whiskeys. I need to process this. Of course. I remained seated, maintaining composure. Jason Hargrove, my attorney, will be contacting you about the divorce proceedings. Given these clarifications about our assets, I expect things can be resolved relatively smoothly. Jason Hargrove? David frowned. The Jason Hargrove? From Hargrove, Mitchell and Ellis? I nodded. The prestigious law firm was well known in business circles. He's been my attorney for 4 years. David ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I recognized from countless discussions about his business setbacks. You've been living a completely different life than the one I thought we shared. No, I corrected him. I've been living the same life, but you only saw the portions that directly involved you. He flinched at the truth in my words. I should go. He gathered his messenger bag, his movements mechanical. Megan is expecting me for dinner. I noted how he no longer attempted to hide his relationship with his marketing director, now that pretenses had fallen away. Before you go, I said, opening my desk drawer and removing a manila envelope. You should have this. He took it warily. What is it? Documentation of your loan payoff. You'll need it for your records. He stared at the envelope, then back at me. You really did it. You really paid off my Wharton loans. Yes. Why? He asked again, his voice softer now. Why do that for someone you knew was leaving? I considered my answer carefully, wanting precision rather than emotion. I made a financial commitment when we married. Your debt affected our overall position. Eliminating it was the sound decision, regardless of our personal circumstances. I paused, then added, Additionally, I believed in your potential, David. I still do. Evotech might succeed where your previous ventures didn't. Without loan payments hanging over you, you have a better chance at building something sustainable. He shook his head slowly, a bitter laugh escaping. You're still being practical. Even now. It's who I am, I replied simply. It's who I've always been. David moved toward the door, envelope clutched in his hand. He paused with his fingers on the handle, looking back at me. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not for leaving. We both know our marriage was over long before I packed those suitcases. But for not seeing you. Not really seeing what you were building or who you were becoming. The apology was unexpected, and strangely, I found myself appreciating its sincerity. Thank you, I said. Good luck with Evotech. I mean that. He nodded once, then opened the door and left. Through the glass walls, I watched as Caroline professionally escorted him to the elevator, maintaining the fiction that he was simply another valued client concluding a meeting. Marcus entered a moment later, closing the door behind him. Well? He asked, eyeing the 2 empty whiskey tumblers. Well, I echoed. That's one conversation I won't need to have after the Forbes piece publishes. How did he take it? About as expected. Shock, followed by recalculation, followed by the recognition that he severely underestimated me. I smiled slightly. It was actually quite civilized. Marcus sat in the chair David had vacated. And the loans? Did you tell him? Yes. He was appropriately stunned. Do you think he regrets leaving? Now? I considered the question, remembering the complex emotions that had crossed David's face throughout our conversation. I think he regrets not knowing who he was married to, I answered truthfully. Whether that translates to regret about leaving, that remains to be seen. Marcus checked his watch. We have the investor call in 30 minutes. Should we reschedule? Absolutely not. I straightened the papers on my desk, mentally transitioning back to business mode. This personal matter is resolved. Artemis takes priority now. As Marcus left to prepare for the call, I allowed myself a moment of reflection. The confrontation with David had gone more smoothly than anticipated. The revelation of Artemis, the clarification about our assets, the disclosure about his loans, all had been received with surprising composure, considering the circumstances. Perhaps he was truly ready to move on with Megan, regardless of these new revelations. Perhaps he was simply in shock, the full impact yet to register. Either way, the burden of secrecy had lifted, allowing me to fully consolidate my personal and professional identities. My phone buzzed with a text from Jason. Divorce papers ready for review. Available to meet tomorrow? I responded affirmatively, then turned to the window, watching the afternoon sun glint off neighboring skyscrapers. Phase 2 was now complete. David knew about Artemis, knew about his cleared debt, knew the true distribution of our marital assets. The careful compartmentalization I'd maintained for years had collapsed into a single, coherent reality. Phase 3 would now begin. The public emergence of Artemis through the Forbes feature, the formalization of our divorce, and the business. Expansion I'd been planning for months. As for David, his reaction once the initial shock wore off would be revealing. Would he attempt to leverage his position as my soon-to-be ex-husband when the Forbes piece published? Would he try to negotiate a more favorable divorce settlement based on my company's success? Or would he accept his miscalculation with dignity and focus on building Evotech with his debt-free advantage? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain. I was no longer David's practical wife. I was Eliza Chen, CEO of Artemis Financial, architect of my own success, and, for the first time in our 8-year relationship, fully visible to the man who had never truly seen me. My intercom buzzed. Caroline's voice came through. The investors are ready for your call, Ms. Chen. Thank you, Caroline. I'll be right with them. I gathered my materials for the call, leaving the personal matters behind. The future, my future, Artemis's future, awaited, unobscured by the shadows I'd deliberately cultivated during my marriage. It was time to step fully into the light. The morning the Forbes article hit, I was already in the Chicago office, overseeing final preparations for our formal opening. The sleek space occupied the 38th floor of a downtown high-rise, offering views of Lake Michigan and the urban skyline. Floor-to-ceiling windows flooded the reception area with natural light, illuminating the understated elegance I'd insisted upon for all Artemis locations. My phone began buzzing incessantly at 6:42 a.m., precisely the time the digital version of Betrayal. The article went live. I silenced it temporarily, preferring to view the piece on my laptop with a clear mind and a cup of strong coffee. The article was everything we'd hoped for. The headline, "The Secret Financial Whisperer: How Eliza Chen Built a $500 million Empire Solving Rich People's Money Problems," was accompanied by a professional portrait of me standing against the Chicago skyline, arms crossed, expression confident but approachable. The photography captured exactly the image I wanted Artemis to project: sophisticated, trustworthy, discreet. The text was equally satisfying, detailing Artemis's rise from boutique consultancy to industry powerhouse, highlighting our specialized approach to high-net-worth clients with complex financial entanglements. The journalist had portrayed me as a financial strategist with an uncanny ability to navigate complicated monetary situations, the financial equivalent of a chess grandmaster, thinking 5 moves ahead. My favorite paragraph came near the end. Chen's approach differs dramatically from traditional financial advisors. "I don't just manage assets," she explains. "I solve problems that seem insurmountable to my clients. Whether it's crushing debt despite significant income, complicated inheritance structures, or untangling years of poor financial decisions, we create personalized strategies that actually work." This problem-solving philosophy has attracted a client roster that includes Fortune 500 executives, professional athletes, and entertainment industry elites, all willing to pay premium fees for Chen's specialized expertise. No mention of David, of course. I'd been careful during my interviews to keep my personal life separate from my professional achievements. The journalist had respected those boundaries, focusing exclusively on Artemis's business model and expansion plans. Satisfied with the article, I unmuted my phone and watched as notifications flooded in. Congratulatory messages from colleagues, inquiries from potential clients, interview requests from other business publications. The response was immediate and overwhelming, exactly as Marcus had predicted. I scrolled through the messages, noting with particular interest that 3 of them were from David. "Just saw the Forbes piece. Congratulations. Impressive. We should talk. Things left unresolved from yesterday. Call me when you have a moment." His messages were surprisingly measured, lacking the emotional undercurrent I might have expected. Perhaps our face-to-face confrontation in my office had provided sufficient closure. Or perhaps, more likely, he was still processing the magnitude of his miscalculation. I set my phone aside without responding. David's concerns, whatever they might be, were no longer my priority. The Chicago office opening demanded my full attention. A carefully orchestrated event designed to announce Artemis's expansion to current and prospective clients in the Midwest market. Marcus joined me an hour later, tablet in hand as always. "The Forbes piece is a hit. Website traffic up 317% already. Caroline's fielding calls nonstop. New client inquiries? 23 so far, including a Silicon Valley CEO and 2 professional athletes." He grinned. "Exactly the demographic we were targeting." I nodded, pleased but unsurprised. The expansion timing couldn't be better. Direct the most promising Chicago prospects to Nathan for preliminary consultations. Nathan Foster, our new Midwest Regional Director, had been carefully selected for his combination of financial expertise and established connections throughout Chicago's business elite. He'd left a prestigious position at Goldman Sachs to join Artemis, A recruiting coup Marcus had engineered with methodical precision. "David's been calling the office," Marcus mentioned casually. "3 attempts in the past hour." I saw his texts. I continued reviewing the event schedule for the evening's opening reception. "He can wait." Marcus raised an eyebrow but didn't comment further. The day proceeded according to plan. Meetings with local financial journalists, a working lunch with Nathan and his newly assembled team, final walkthroughs of the office space to ensure everything met Artemis standards. Every hour brought new responses to the Forbes article, each validation of the strategy I'd been crafting for years. At 4:30 p.m., I retreated to the temporary office Nathan had arranged for my use, intending to prepare for the evening's event. Caroline had coordinated the delivery of my wardrobe, including the emerald Armani dress and Louboutins I'd selected specifically for the reception. As I changed, I finally decided to address David's increasingly persistent messages. I typed a brief response. "In Chicago for business. Very busy with office opening. Will call when time permits." His reply came almost immediately. "We need to talk about the house. And Evotech." I frowned slightly at the mention of his startup. During our confrontation in my office, I'd been clear about the separation of our assets. The house was mine. His business venture was his. There should be nothing to discuss. "My lawyer has all relevant information," I responded. "Please direct questions to Jason." I set my phone to Do Not Disturb mode and returned my attention to the evening ahead. The Chicago reception would host 70 carefully selected guests, existing clients with Midwest connections, prospective clients identified by Nathan's team, and strategic business partners essential for regional expansion. The event had been planned with the same attention to detail I applied to complex financial strategies. At 6:15 p.m., I arrived at the newly completed office space. The transformation from the morning's final preparations was impressive, subtle. Lighting highlighted the architectural elements, catering staff moved efficiently through the space, and the custom sound system played ambient music at the perfect volume for networking conversations. Nathan met me near the entrance, his expression conveying both excitement and nervous energy. "First guests arriving in 15 minutes. Everyone's in position." I nodded approvingly. "The space looks perfect. You've done excellent work, Nathan." His posture relaxed slightly at the praise. "Thank you for the opportunity, Eliza. Leaving Goldman wasn't easy, but this..." He gestured around the office. "This is worth it." By 7 p.m., the reception was in full swing. I moved through the space with practiced ease, engaging in the precise balance of professional conversation and personal connection that high-net-worth clients expected. Nathan had assembled an impressive guest list. Chicago's financial elite mingled with potential clients, each interaction carefully engineered to position Artemis as the solution to problems they might not have realized needed solving. Marcus appeared at my elbow during a momentary pause between conversations. "We've already secured 3 follow-up meetings from this event alone. Nathan was a perfect choice for Chicago." Agreed. I accepted a glass of champagne from a passing server. Boston and LA director selections proceeding as planned? Final. Interviews next week. We'll have recommendations for your approval by Friday. I was about to respond when my attention was caught by a commotion near the reception desk. The administrative assistant's voice rose slightly above the ambient conversation, carrying a note of concern. "Sir, I'm afraid this is a private event. If you don't have an invitation..." I didn't need to see the visitor to know who it was. Only one person would be presumptuous enough to attempt entry to an exclusive Artemis event without an invitation. David. Marcus followed my gaze, his expression darkening. "Want me to handle it?" "No." I handed him my champagne glass. "I'll take care of this. Continue with the Stevens group. They're still hesitating about the full-service package." I moved toward the reception area, maintaining a calm exterior despite the simmering irritation beneath. David stood at the desk, attempting to charm his way past the increasingly flustered assistant. He was well dressed in what appeared to be a new suit. Tom Ford, if I wasn't mistaken. An expensive choice for someone whose financial circumstances I knew intimately. "It's all right, Melanie," I said as I approached. "I'll speak with Mr. Morrison." The assistant's relief was palpable as she returned to her duties. David turned to face me, and I was struck by the calculated nature of his appearance. The suit, the haircut, the confident posture. He had dressed for this confrontation with deliberate precision. "What are you doing here, David?" I kept my voice low, mindful of the nearby guests. "We need to talk." He glanced around the impressive space. I tried calling, texting. This is hardly the appropriate time or place. I maintained professional composure, though internally I was recalibrating, assessing his motivation for this dramatic appearance. "I'm in the middle of a business event." "I can see that." His tone was cutting. "Quite the expansion. Chicago today, Boston and LA next week, according to Forbes." I guided him to a quiet corner near the coat check, away from the main reception area. "How did you even know I was here?" "The article mentioned the Chicago opening. Caroline confirmed when I called the office." He smiled thinly. "She's loyal, but not particularly skilled at deception." Mental note: additional training for Caroline on handling personal inquiries. "What's so urgent it couldn't wait until my return to New York?" I asked, crossing my arms. David's expression shifted, becoming more serious. "I've been speaking with investors for Evotech, major funding opportunities. But there's a complication. Your startup is no longer my concern," I reminded him. "Whatever complications you're facing." "The complication is you," he interrupted. "Or rather, your sudden public profile." I raised an eyebrow, waiting for elaboration. "My investors happened to see the Forbes article." His voice carried a hint of accusation. "Suddenly, they're very interested in the fact that my wife, soon-to-be ex-wife," I corrected, "is the financial wunderkind helping wealthy clients solve complex money problems." He lowered his voice further. "It raises questions about why I would leave a marriage to someone so obviously successful. Questions about my judgment." So that was it. His precious startup funding was threatened by the revelation of my success. His carefully constructed narrative, whatever story he'd told Megan and his investors about our marriage and separation, was now compromised by the public emergence of Artemis and my profile in Forbes. That sounds like a personal branding problem, David. Not a legal one, and certainly not my problem. I checked my watch pointedly. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have guests to attend to." He reached for my arm as I turned to leave, stopping just short of making contact. "There's more. The house." I paused, genuinely puzzled. "What about it?" "As I explained yesterday, the house is solely in my name." "I've contributed to the mortgage for 8 years, he countered. "Made improvements, paid property taxes. I've spoken with a lawyer who believes I have a strong claim to equitable division, regardless of whose name is on the deed." The strategy was becoming clear. David was attempting to leverage the public exposure of Artemis and my success to secure a more favorable divorce settlement. A predictable move, but one I'd anticipated and prepared for. "Your contributions were minimal compared to the actual costs," I stated coldly. "Most improvements were cosmetic changes you wanted, not equity-building renovations. And as for property taxes," I smiled thinly, "those payments came from our joint account, which I predominantly funded." David's expression hardened. "My lawyer disagrees. We're prepared to make this complicated, Eliza. Very public, very messy." The implied threat hung between us. David knew that Artemis's business model relied heavily on discretion, on my carefully cultivated reputation for solving problems quietly and effectively. A public, contentious divorce battle could potentially damage that image. I studied him for a moment, recognizing the desperation beneath his confident facade. The new suit, the surprise appearance in Chicago, the vague threats. These were the actions of someone grasping for leverage, not someone negotiating from a position of strength. "David," I said, my voice softening slightly, "think very carefully about the path you're considering. You have no legal claim to Artemis. Your contributions to the house were minimal and well documented. And as for making things public," I met his gaze directly. "Consider who has more to lose in terms of reputation." He blinked, confusion crossing his features. "The Forbes article portrays me as a financial strategist who helps clients resolve complex monetary situations. I die." Continued. "How do you think the public would perceive a man who left his successful wife for his younger employee immediately after she paid off his six-figure student loan debt?" Color drained from his face as the implication registered. In any public narrative of our divorce, he would inevitably be cast as the villain, the ungrateful husband who abandoned his supportive wife at the precise moment she'd freed him from crushing debt. "That's not... You can't..." he stammered. "I have no intention of making our personal matters public," I assured him. "But if you force this into the legal spotlight, understand that the resulting story won't be flattering to you, Evotech, or your relationship with Megan." David seemed to physically deflate, his carefully constructed bravado collapsing under the weight of this simple truth. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "Exactly what I've already outlined. A clean, quiet divorce. You keep Evotech and your personal possessions. I retain the house, the investment portfolio, and all Artemis assets." I straightened my emerald dress, preparing to return to my guests. "The debt-free status you now enjoy should be more than sufficient compensation." He ran a hand through his hair, the familiar gesture of frustration I'd observed countless times during our marriage. "And if I agree? What story do we tell people? My investors are already asking questions." "Tell them whatever serves your purposes, David. That we grew apart, that our professional lives took us in different directions, that the separation was mutual and amicable." I shrugged slightly. "The truth, or some version of it, is always more sustainable than elaborate deceptions." The irony of this statement, given my years of compartmentalization, wasn't lost on either of us. "Fine," he conceded. "I'll speak with my lawyer tomorrow, call off the house claim." I nodded, accepting his surrender with neither celebration nor condemnation. A wise decision. Now, I really must return to my guests. David glanced past me toward the reception, where Chicago's financial elite continued their networking, oblivious to our quiet confrontation. "You've built something impressive, Eliza. I should have seen it sooner." The admission carried a hint of genuine regret, but it came far too late to matter. "Yes," I agreed simply. "You should have." I turned away, signaling the conclusion of our conversation, but paused at his next words. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "Megan left. Last night. After seeing the Forbes article." I looked back at him, momentarily surprised by this revelation. "I'm sorry to hear that." And strangely, I meant it. Not because I harbored any hope for reconciliation, that door had firmly closed, but because I recognized the painful recalibration David was experiencing. His carefully constructed narrative was crumbling from all sides. "Yeah, well." He attempted a casual shrug that didn't quite mask his bitterness. Turns out she was more interested in the struggling entrepreneur with potential than the guy who left his successful wife. Said it changed the whole dynamic between us. I could have pointed out the irony. That David had left me partly because of my practicality, only to be left himself when the full extent of that practicality was revealed. I could have noted how Megan's departure proved my earlier point about how others would view his decisions, but such observations would have been unnecessarily cruel. "You should go, David," I said instead. "Consider our personal matters resolved, pending the formal dissolution of our marriage." He nodded once, turning toward the exit. The slump of his shoulders spoke volumes about his diminished state. Not just the loss of his leverage in our divorce, but the collapse of his relationship with Megan, the potential complications with his investors, the recognition of opportunities, missed and misjudgments made. As he walked away, Marcus appeared at my side. "Everything okay?" "Perfect," I assured him, my composure fully restored. "Just tying up loose ends." "He seemed disturbed," Marcus observed, watching David's retreating figure. "Reality adjustments often are." I smoothed my dress and refocused on the reception. "Now, you mentioned the Stevens group was hesitating?" The remainder of the evening proceeded flawlessly. By the conclusion of the reception, Nathan had secured 7 follow-up appointments with high-potential clients, 3 existing clients had increased their service packages, and local financial media had requested exclusive interviews about Artemis's Midwest expansion. Later, in my hotel suite overlooking the Chicago skyline, I allowed myself a moment of reflection. The day had brought both professional triumph and personal resolution. The Forbes article had successfully positioned Artemis exactly as intended. The Chicago office launch had exceeded expectations. And David's appearance, though unexpected, had accelerated the resolution of our divorce, removing the final obstacle to my fully consolidated life. My phone chimed with a text from Jason Hargrove. David's lawyer called. All house claims withdrawn. Proceeding with uncontested divorce as planned. Congratulations on Forbes. Brilliantly done. I smiled slightly at the validation. Phase 3 was proceeding precisely according to plan. Artemis unveiled to the public, divorce proceedings simplified, expansion strategy in motion. The final phase, living my truth without compartmentalization or constraint, now awaited. For the first time in 8 years, all aspects of my life aligned into a coherent whole. No more hidden successes, no more strategic omissions, no more supporting someone who couldn't recognize my value. I poured a glass of champagne from the bottle Marcus had arranged as a celebration of the successful launch. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the Boston location details, the LA staffing decisions, the influx of client inquiries generated by the Forbes piece. But tonight, I could acknowledge the satisfaction of plans perfectly executed. My phone rang. Nathan, likely. Calling with final details from the reception. "Eliza Chen," I answered, using my full name without hesitation or qualification. No longer David's practical wife. No longer the secret financial whisperer operating in the shadows. Simply Eliza Chen. Finally and completely herself. 6 months. After the Chicago opening, Artemis Financial had evolved from rising star to established powerhouse. Our Boston office had launched with similar success. The LA expansion was proceeding ahead of schedule, and client acquisitions had exceeded even Marcus's ambitious projections. The Forbes article had triggered a cascade of media attention, features, in Business Insider Bloomberg, and a particularly satisfying profile in Harvard Business Review titled, "The Stealth Strategist, Eliza Chen's Unconventional Path to Financial Empire." I sat in my Manhattan office, reviewing quarterly reports with the focused attention that had become my trademark. The morning sun illuminated the space, catching on the 3 awards Artemis had received in recent months. Most gratifying was the crystal sculpture from Women in Finance, recognizing me as Entrepreneur of the Year, vindication for every moment my business advice had been dismissed or undervalued during my marriage. Caroline's voice came through the intercom. "Ms. Chen, your 10:30 appointment has arrived." I glanced at my calendar, momentarily puzzled. My morning schedule showed an 11:15 meeting with our compliance team, but nothing at 10:30. "I don't have a 10:30 scheduled," I replied. Caroline's voice held an unusual hesitation. "It's Mr. Morrison. David. He says he has an appointment." I frowned, surprised by this development. The divorce had been finalized 3 months ago. a remarkably smooth process once David had withdrawn his claims on the house. We'd had minimal contact since our confrontation in Chicago, communicating primarily through lawyers to complete the necessary paperwork. The last I'd heard, Evotech had secured its second round of funding and was expanding its development team. Curiosity won over irritation. "Send him in." I closed my laptop and stood, moving to the sitting area near the windows rather than remaining behind my desk. A small strategic choice, maintaining the power position while creating an atmosphere less confrontational than our previous meeting. The door opened and David entered. His appearance surprised me. Gone was the desperate energy of Chicago, the forced confidence of his surprise appearance at the reception. Instead, he moved with genuine self-assurance, dressed in a well-fitted but understated suit. Most notably, he carried a slim leather portfolio rather than his usual messenger bag, a subtle but significant shift in his professional presentation. "Eliza," he greeted me with a polite nod. "Thank you for seeing me without an appointment." "I admit I'm curious about what brings you here," I replied, gesturing toward the sitting area. "Please." He took a seat, placing the portfolio on the coffee table between us. "You look well. Success suits you." "Thank you." I remained composed, waiting for him to reveal his purpose. "I imagine you're wondering why I'm here." He leaned forward slightly. "It's professional, not personal. I have a business proposition." This was unexpected. "A proposition?" Evotech has evolved significantly since we last spoke. He opened the portfolio, revealing neatly organized documents. "We've refined our platform, expanded our user base, and secured significant additional funding." I nodded, still uncertain where this was heading. "I've seen the announcements. Congratulations." "What hasn't been announced yet is our new division." David extracted a sleek brochure from the portfolio. Evotech Financial, a specialized platform designed to help individuals manage debt repayment strategies, particularly student loans and other education-related obligations. I accepted the brochure, scanning its contents with professional interest. The platform appeared sophisticated, offering personalized repayment plans, refinancing options, and saving strategies. The market positioning was clever, targeting young professionals with advanced degrees and corresponding debt burdens. "This looks well developed," I acknowledged, "but I still don't understand why you're here." David took a deep breath. "We want Artemis as a strategic partner. Your expertise in debt management for high-net-worth individuals complements our focus on emerging professionals. Together, we could create a comprehensive service covering the entire financial life cycle." I studied him carefully, looking for signs of the old David, the one who used charm to mask insecurity, who approached business with more enthusiasm than strategy. But the man sitting across from me seemed different, more grounded, more prepared. "Why Artemis specifically?" I asked. "There are larger financial firms with established tech integration. Because no one understands debt strategy like you do." His response was immediate and sincere. "What you built with Artemis, the personalized approach, the focus on complex financial situations, it's exactly what Evotech Financial aims to provide, just for a different demographic." I set the brochure down, considering his proposal. The business logic was sound. Artemis specialized in clients who had already accumulated wealth but faced complex financial entanglements. Evotech Financial would target those building toward wealth, helping them navigate early career financial challenges. The synergy had potential. "And the personal complications?" I asked directly. "We're recently divorced, David. That creates unique challenges for any business partnership." He nodded, acknowledging the reality. "I've thought about that extensively. This isn't about trying to reinsert myself into your life or claim credit for your success. It's a genuine business opportunity that benefits both companies." "And Megan?" I asked, noting his slight wince at the name. "Would she be part of this collaboration?" "Megan is no longer with Evotech," he replied evenly. "She left shortly after Well, after seeing the Forbes article, she's working for a competitor now. I absorbed this information without comment. Whether Megan had left because of the revelation about my success, or because she'd recognized the potential complications of dating the recently divorced founder, was immaterial. Her departure simplified the proposition David was presenting. I'd need to see detailed financial projections, I said. Technical specifications. User data from your beta testing. Of course. David removed a USB drive from the portfolio. Everything's here. We've been developing this for 4 months. The platform is ready for launch, pending final partnerships. I accepted the drive, setting it beside the brochure. What exactly are you proposing in terms of Artemis's involvement? 3 options. He extracted a final document from the portfolio. Option 1. Artemis provides consulting services during our launch phase, lending credibility and expertise without direct investment. Option 2. A strategic partnership with revenue sharing from client referrals between platforms. Option 3. Joint venture status, with Artemis taking an equity position in Evotech Financial specifically, not the parent company. The proposals were surprisingly well structured, reflecting a level of business sophistication I hadn't previously associated with David. Each option offered clear benefits for Artemis while maintaining appropriate boundaries between our companies, and, by extension, between us personally. You've put significant thought into this, I acknowledged. I've learned a lot in the past 6 months. His expression turned reflective. About business, about myself, about what success actually requires. I detected no artifice in his statement. None of the practiced charm he'd once relied upon. Something had genuinely shifted in his approach, suggesting that perhaps the collapse of his carefully constructed narrative had forced meaningful growth. I'll review your materials, I decided. Discuss the options with my team. But I want to be clear, David. Any potential collaboration would be strictly professional, compartmentalized from our personal history. He smiled slightly at my choice of words. I understand compartmentalization better now. Sometimes it's the only way forward. The acknowledgement carried a hint of self-awareness that caught my attention. David had never been particularly introspective during our marriage, preferring to focus on future possibilities rather than present realities or past mistakes. How did Evotech Financial develop? I asked, genuine curiosity overriding my professional reserve. It seems like a significant pivot from your original fitness platform. David leaned back slightly, his posture relaxing. It grew from personal experience, actually. After you paid off my student loans, a fact I'm still processing, by the way, I started thinking about how many people are trapped by educational debt, how it limits their options, distorts their decisions. He gestured toward the brochure. I realized I had unique insight. I'd experienced both the burden of significant student debt and the remarkable freedom of its absence. The fitness platform was doing well, but this felt meaningful in a different way. The explanation rang true. David had always been motivated by personal connections to his business ideas. The meal delivery service had emerged from his own dietary restrictions. The staffing agency had grown from his frustrations hiring developers. His ventures typically started from authentic challenges he'd faced, though they often faltered in execution. Who's handling the financial algorithms? I asked, transitioning back to business. The debt optimization strategies require sophisticated modeling. We've assembled a strong team, but that's actually where Artemis would be most valuable. He hesitated briefly. Your approach to accelerated loan payoffs, the one you applied to my Wharton debt, is exactly the kind of strategy our users need. The reference to my strategic elimination of his loans carried no resentment, only professional admiration. Another indicator of his evolving perspective. I'd need to meet your development team, I said. Understand their capabilities before considering any partnership. Of course, they're expecting your questions. In fact, he checked his watch. They're prepared for a video conference whenever you're available. I raised an eyebrow at his presumption. You seem quite confident I'd be interested. Not confident, he corrected. Hopeful. The business case is strong, Eliza. This collaboration makes sense regardless of our history. I studied him for a moment, longer, weighing multiple considerations simultaneously. The business opportunity appeared legitimate. Evotech Financial addressed a market segment Artemis had identified but not pursued. The partnership structure protected Artemis's independence, while leveraging complementary strengths. Yet the personal complications couldn't be dismissed entirely. David and I had shared 8 years of marriage, culminating in his departure and the subsequent revelations about Artemis. Any collaboration would inevitably carry the weight of that history. I'll need time to review these materials properly, I said finally. Have your team send available times for the video conference later this week. David nodded, visibly pleased with this incremental progress. Thank you for considering it. I know our history creates complications. As he gathered his portfolio, preparing to leave, an unexpected question formed in my mind. One unrelated to business prospects or partnership structures. Are you happier now, David? The question seemed to catch him off guard. He paused, considering. His response with uncharacteristic thoughtfulness. Not happier, he said finally. More authentic, maybe. I spent years chasing external validation, measuring myself against others' standards of success, trying to be the brilliant entrepreneur everyone expected. He met my gaze directly. Learning about Artemis, seeing what you built while I was floundering, was painfully humbling, but necessary. It forced me to confront how much of my identity was wrapped up in potential rather than achievement. The admission carried a weight of self-awareness I hadn't anticipated. During our marriage, David had consistently deflected personal responsibility for his business failures, attributing setbacks to market conditions or investor short-sightedness, rather than strategic miscalculations. And Evotech? I asked. The original platform? Doing well. Steady growth, positive user feedback. But Evotech Financial is where I'm focusing my energy now. He smiled slightly. Turns out I'm better at helping people manage money problems than perfect their fitness routines. Another insight I should have recognized sooner. I nodded, acknowledging his self-reflection without commenting directly. I appreciate your candor, David, and the professionalism of your proposal. That means a lot coming from you. He stood, preparing to leave. Especially now that I understand exactly who I was married to. After he departed, I remained in the sitting area, contemplating our unexpected interaction. The David who had just presented a coherent business proposition seemed fundamentally different from the husband who had packed 3 suitcases and departed our marriage without understanding who he was leaving. Marcus entered shortly after, clearly having monitored the meeting from a discreet distance. So the prodigal ex-husband returns, with a business proposal no less. I handed him the brochure and USB drive. Review these. The concept has merit, regardless of its source. Marcus raised an eyebrow, surprised by my receptiveness. You're actually considering it? A partnership with David? I'm considering a strategic opportunity for Artemis, I corrected. The personal history is irrelevant to the business evaluation. If you say so? His skepticism was evident. But given your history. Our history is precisely why I can evaluate this objectively, I interrupted. I understand David's strengths and weaknesses better than any potential partner. That knowledge is valuable in assessing the proposition. Marcus accepted the materials with remaining doubt. I'll have the team review the technical specifications. Financial projections on your desk by tomorrow morning. After he left, I moved to the window, gazing out at the Manhattan skyline while processing the unexpected developments. David's appearance, and more significantly, his transformed approach, had disrupted my carefully ordered narrative of our separation. I'd categorized our divorce as the necessary elimination of a relationship that had outlived its purpose, a clean break between my compartmentalized past and my integrated future. Yet the man who had just presented a sophisticated business proposition didn't fit neatly into that narrative. He demonstrated growth I hadn't anticipated, self-awareness I hadn't credited him with developing. My phone buzzed with a text from Jason Hargrove. David's lawyer requested copies of final divorce settlement. For their investors, standard due diligence for potential partnerships. Approve? I responded affirmatively, recognizing another indicator of David's professionalism. He was properly disclosing our previous relationship to his investors, treating the potential Artemis partnership with appropriate transparency. 3 days later, having thoroughly reviewed Evotech Financial's materials and conducted the video conference with their development team, I sat in the conference room with Marcus and our Chief Financial Officer, Sarah Winters. The financial projections spread before us told a compelling story. Evotech Financial addressed a genuine market need with innovative technology, and Artemis's expertise could significantly enhance their offering. The algorithms are impressive, Sarah acknowledged. Their approach to debt optimization incorporates behavioral economics in ways traditional financial platforms haven't mastered. Marcus remained more skeptical. The business case is solid, I'll grant that. But the personal complications can't be dismissed. He's your ex-husband, Eliza. 6 months ago, he was threatening legal action over the house. That was before the divorce was finalized, I reminded him. All personal matters have been resolved. On paper, perhaps, Marcus countered. But business partnerships require trust, especially at this level of integration. Can you genuinely trust David after everything that happened? It was a fair question, one I'd been contemplating since David's unexpected appearance in my office. Trust had never been the central issue in our marriage. Competence had. I'd trusted David's intentions, while doubting his execution. Now, faced with evidence of his professional growth, I found myself reevaluating both dimensions. I trust him to act in his company's best interests, I said finally. And in this case, those interests align with Artemis's, the structure of option 2. I indicated the strategic partnership agreement provides sufficient protection while allowing meaningful collaboration. Sarah nodded her agreement. The revenue-sharing model is conservative in the early phases, with performance triggers for increased integration. Minimal downside risk for Artemis. Marcus leaned back, his expression conveying lingering reservations. And what happens when the Forbes reporter who profiled you discovers you're now partnering with the ex-husband who left you right before your big break? That's a juicy follow-up story they won't resist. We control that narrative, I responded, calmly. The partnership announcement emphasizes the complementary expertise of both companies. Any personal questions receive the same response. We've moved past our personal history to pursue a business opportunity that benefits both organizations and their clients. After further discussion, we reached consensus. Artemis would proceed with the strategic partnership, beginning with a 6-month trial period before committing to longer-term integration. I would personally oversee the collaboration, maintaining appropriate professional boundaries while leveraging my unique understanding of both companies' strengths. 2 weeks later, I sat across from David in Artemis's conference room, finalizing the partnership agreement. Legal teams from both companies had reviewed the documents extensively, ensuring all contingencies were addressed. The press release goes out tomorrow morning, I confirmed, signing the final page. Your team is prepared for the inevitable personal questions? David nodded, adding his signature beside mine. Thoroughly briefed. We stick to business benefits, deflect personal history questions with the approved statement. I studied him as he reviewed the signature pages, struck again by the evident changes in his demeanor. The David I'd married had approached business deals with nervous energy barely disguised as confidence. This version moved with authentic self-assurance, comfortable in his hard-earned expertise. Evotech Financial launches next month, he noted, handing the completed documents to my assistant for processing. Your team is scheduled for integration training beginning next week. Marcus will oversee the technical implementation, I confirmed. I'll handle the financial model adaptation personally. David smiled slightly. Your strategic debt elimination approach, the core of our offering. One component, I corrected. Your platform's accessibility is equally valuable. Artemis clients can recommend it to their adult children, emerging professionals in their networks. Our business discussion continued for another 30 minutes, addressing final details of the launch timeline and marketing strategy. As we concluded, David hesitated momentarily before speaking. I want you to know something, Eliza. His tone shifted from professional to personal, though maintaining appropriate boundaries. Working with you, even in this limited capacity, is an opportunity I don't take for granted. I understand now what I couldn't see before. I raised an eyebrow, waiting for elaboration. You were never just my practical wife, he continued. You were always a strategic visionary. I just lacked the perspective to recognize it. The acknowledgement carried no romantic undertone, no suggestion of reconciliation. Instead, it offered something more valuable. Genuine professional respect, the recognition I'd never received during our marriage. We're different people now, I observed. Perhaps that allows for a more productive relationship. David nodded, accepting this assessment. Compartmentalized, but authentic. As he gathered his materials, preparing to leave, I found myself reflecting on the circuitous path that had led to this unexpected collaboration. 6 months ago, I would have dismissed any suggestion of partnering with David as absurd, emotionally complicated and professionally questionable. Yet here we were, entering a business relationship built on clearer understanding than we'd ever achieved in marriage. The irony wasn't lost on me. Our professional partnership might succeed precisely because our personal one had failed, teaching difficult but necessary lessons to us both. The Forbes reporter called again. David mentioned casually as he reached the door. Wants a joint interview about the partnership. Declined, I presume? Of course. Though their suggested headline was amusing, Financial Power Couple Reunites, in business only. I smiled slightly at the media's predictable framing. They'll create their narrative regardless of our input. True, but we know the real story. He paused, his expression thoughtful. That sometimes it takes losing something to understand its true value. And that recognition, even when it comes too late for one purpose, can serve another. After David left, I remained in the conference room, reviewing the signed partnership agreement with its carefully negotiated terms. The document represented something I hadn't anticipated. Not just a strategic business opportunity for Artemis, but a form of reconciliation I hadn't known I needed. Not romantic reconciliation. Our marriage had ended for valid reasons. Our personal paths permanently diverged. Rather, this was professional reconciliation, the acknowledgement of value that had been missing throughout our relationship. My phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. Partnership announcement scheduled for 9 a.m. tomorrow. Financial media already requesting comment. You still sure about this? I responded with simple certainty. Absolutely. Time to write the next chapter. As I gathered my materials and prepared to return to my office, I reflected on the journey of the past year. David had left after I cleared his $100K debt, unaware of my company and my success. That departure had triggered a cascade of revelations, confrontations, and ultimately, transformations for us both. Now, as we entered this unexpected professional collaboration, I recognized that our story had never been merely about debt cleared or companies hidden. It had been about value, recognizing it, claiming it, and ultimately receiving appropriate acknowledgement for it. David had left without understanding who I truly was. Now he knew, not just my professional accomplishments, but the strategic mind behind them. And ironically, That understanding made possible a relationship that would benefit us both, along with the clients our companies served. The circle had closed. The compartments had served their purpose and been appropriately dismantled. And in their place stood something unexpected but promising. A clear-eyed partnership between two people who finally saw each other accurately, without the distorting lens of marital expectations or personal projections. As I stepped into my office, I paused to adjust one of the awards Artemis had received, the Crystal Entrepreneur of the Year sculpture that represented external validation of what I'd always known internally. Beside it stood a framed copy of the Forbes article that had catalyzed so many changes. Soon, another article would join it, the partnership announcement that would begin the next phase of both our professional journeys. The narrative had evolved beyond revenge or vindication into something more nuanced. The recognition that sometimes the greatest success comes not from proving others wrong, but from creating new possibilities neither party could have envisioned alone. David and I had failed as husband and wife, but as business associates with clear boundaries and mutual respect. That chapter remained to be written, and for the first time in our long and complicated history, we would write it with full awareness of who we truly were, both independently and in relation to each other. The debt had been cleared. The company revealed. And now, finally, the reconciliation achieved. Not of our marriage, but of our understanding. Some might call it ironic. I called it strategic. After all, recognizing value and leveraging it appropriately had always been my specialty. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.